basically, okay. So basically, Oracle, when someone is working with Oracle, will be having different types of roles in Oracles also. So one can be a developer, one can be a DBA, one can be a performance tuning engineer. So basically, the main objective of using the Oracle database is store the data in a relational database in a required format by creating the necessary DBA objects, tables, and write the logic to process the data to fetch the data. So apart from writing a query that requires output for us, we also need to make sure we are getting the data as early as possible from the DB. In the initial stages of a developer phase, it is fine if we are able to get a query which gives the required output. But when experience is increasing and when more complex data is going to add into the database, it is also important that the result is getting out from the query is coming as early as possible. So there are some mechanisms that is 100% sure. We can write to meet particular requirement. We can write a query n number of ways. All will give the same result to the output, but we need to consider how fast my query has been retrieved. It should use the less number of resources. So we need to make sure that with all these points, my query has been given the required output. So that all points we see today in Oracle Advanced SQL Optimization Techniques. Please stop me if there are any queries in the middle. So basically, the course objective of this is, like, after completion of this course, we will be able to understand the following. So how my SQL query is executed. So when we sit in front of any tool or command prompt, a tool like SQL Developer, Toad, we'll submit a query for execution. We are going to validate the data which we received as output. As a developer, one will never bother about how my query got executed, how data is retrieved from the database, what is the plan it has chosen to retrieve the desired data. So basically, after this course, we'll be understanding how my SQL query is executed. The moment when I submit a query for execution, what are all the things happening in the database, we'll understand all that. So, and also we'll understand what is execution plan. Are there any tools to analyze execution plan? So how do I improve performance of SQL query? So all the time we may not get a chance to write or work in a project which is there from a scratch. Sometimes in a real-time scenario, sometimes we might be put into project where already some code is existing, and we might be given a challenge of improve the performance of the particular SQL query. The one who has developed earlier might have not developed it correctly, or it would have been fine, ran fine for the data size at that time. But because of the increased volume size, maybe that query is not performing good now. We might be put into a scenario to improve the performance of a particular SQL query. So to that, we need to know how can I improve the performance of a SQL query. So here, not necessary that a performance of a SQL query, when you say a SQL query is running for 30 minutes, which is bad, a SQL query which is running for 10 minutes is good, but still if you want to reduce the 10 minutes period also, what are the ways? Is there any way? If there is a way, what is the way that I can try to see whether if I can reduce anything or not? So when I say to improve performance, it's not only running a long time, not only in terms of time, it should also use minimal resources to get the output. And there are something called as hints in performance tuning concept. So we'll also understand what are hints and usage. So also we'll understand what are indexes, and in general there are types of indexes. So what for a particular type of data pattern, we'll also see what type of index I need to create. So based on the data patterns in the table, we'll figure out what type of index to create to improve the performance. So basically, after completion of this course, we'll get expertise in all of these things, which will help in real-time scenarios, and also we'll also see some real-time examples by improving the performance. So when should I choose this course, or when should I go for a performance? So is your answer yes for any of the below questions? So is your query running long than expected? You expect your query, you feel that you have written a simple query, but you feel that output is getting in a very late. So is your query running long than expected? Then, and also your query is not running longer than expected. You expected it to run in 6 to 7 minutes, but you want to improve the performance of your query. And do you know that any proper indexes are created on your tables? Also, you have created an index, you have a proper index, and your query is running longer than expected. And when you see the execution plan, your index is not being used there. So your feeling is that if the index has been used in the execution plan for getting the output, your query may perform better. So, but your index is not being picked by the optimizer. So we need to understand why that index is not being picked, so that if it has been picked, it would have been much faster. So in general, what will happen when a query is submitted? So in general, when a query is submitted for execution, as a developer, we'll only worry about the output. We'll not worry about how query is getting executed. But to see the correct output as early as possible, it depends on the execution plan and optimizer what optimizer has chosen. So when we say here optimizer, when you submit a query for execution, there is something called as an optimizer which will perform some checklist and then submit the, what we see is a plain English, but what we write a query in is a plain English. So optimizer understand that plain English, and what are the tables, DB objects that we have given in that query. Optimizer decodes that particular addresses, it validates something, and then it will submit for the actual data. So it's the optimizer responsibility which prepares the execution plan. So to see the correct output as early as possible, it purely depends on the execution plan that optimizer has chosen. Yes, sometimes we do have control on changing the execution plan. So just a quick thing here, see, to understand what is an execution plan, we need to understand what execution plan is and what happens when a query is submitted. So execution plan shows detailed necessary steps to execute a SQL statement. So it instructs Oracle DB server to perform these steps for which the query has been submitted. Next, if we see, there are execution plan is steps that are expressed as database operators that consume and produce rows. So as I mentioned, execution plan will having some different steps which consume as a database operators and produce rows. I'll show you a sample explain plan also. So optimizer, it's the optimizer decision that decides the order of operators and their implementations. So if you see this, so this is my simple query. I'm joining employee department and I have with the join condition. When I execute this, I'm getting some output. But after I submitting the query and before I get the output, what is happening at the DB side? So as you all know, this is a client where we write some queries and perform some operations. This is a client. We also have a DB server. So when we submit a request from client side, that request will be passed to DB server and will be executed at DB server. So what is happening exactly to get this output? So there are some steps which will perform at DB side, server side. So we'll just see the steps. So basically, when you issue a SQL statement, first step that is performed by the optimizer is syntax check. So whether the query has been written as per the syntax or not. That is the first step that will be checked. If there is any issue in the syntax check, we'll get appropriate error message as there in the database. So if I see, I'm not giving anything here. So if you see, this is an error message. I'm missing a syntax here. So it is saying SQL command not properly ended. So first step that will be performed as soon as we submit a query is syntax check. So that is the first step. Next one is semantic check. Okay, what do we mean by semantic check? When we say semantic check, it's about whether the user who has logged in, if I logged in as a HR user, and if I'm executing employee and department table, that can be a table, that can be a view, that can be a synonym. So when I'm trying to execute something in the from clause, or when I'm trying to access something to a query, so semantic check means it will check whether the user is having appropriate privileges on that particular execution or not. So in this scenario, let me show that. Select start from all users. Okay. So I logged in as a HR schema. If you see, okay, I think I need to give EMP. Okay, if you see, employee and department tables are in HR schema. So owner, in this particular query, owner defines where this object resides. So if I execute this query from HR schema, by default, who has created an object will have all the privileges. So as I create, as the owner for employee and department is HR, he got all the execution privileges, and when you execute this, it passed the syntactic phase and it also passed semantic phase. Now I am logging as another user called SkipOMGR. Now when I am trying to run that, I also have access from SkipOMGR schema as well. Let me revoke that access, or I'll try to connect as a different user. Okay. So now if you see, SkipOMGR user got access on employee and department, but now if you see, how do we, what is the guarantee that first syntax check will happen? So if I'm removing syntax check now, so if you see, my optimizer, when you submit a query, my optimizer first is checking syntax check, though I don't have permissions, though I don't have executed privileges on employee and department of HR table, but the first one I'm getting the error is compilation error, that is syntax check. So now my syntax errors are gone. Now if I try to execute, it is giving me semantic error saying that table or view does not exist. So that is the one which is checked in the semantic check. Now we will see, I am saying now grant select on employee to CDR MGR. I have issued grant select on department to CDR MGR. Now if I go and execute, okay, I'll tell you why I need to prefix schema name. Now I got the output, because now when you submitted a statement, syntax check will be done first, and then semantic check will be done next, a shared pool check. So I am submitting what is meant by shared pool check. So when we come to shadeful check, that means whether, assume you have submitted some particular query n number of times. I have submitted the same query n number of times for some reason. The application is pushing the same query n number of times. So if there are no any changes to objects at data dictionary level, the same execution plan will be used for the execution. That's what you will see here in the diagram. So shadeful check is whatever the query we have received, that will be converted into the language which is understood by the server, that is a machine language. So is that is existing will be checked by the, we'll check that in the shadeful. If it is existing, we call that as a soft parse. So we'll say execution plan exists in cache. If it is yes, it will directly go to execution and it displays the required output. If it is not existing in the plan, so it will optimize and it will prepare a plan and it will give us the output. So it also depends on your shadeful size, how it is caching, and also it depends on the optimization and resource generation. So when every time the plan is being generated, we call it as a hard parse. If the plan is already existing and if that plan is being used, we call that as a soft parse. However, some parse will happen when we submit a query after syntax and semantic check and shadeful check. So how do optimizer identify whether the plan exists or not? So for us to see, for us these both are same. Whether I write, let me keep both in the same place. So for me, select star from HR.employee E, HR.department D, where E.department number equal to D.department number, or the below one. Both are same for me when I see the output. Also in theory both are same, but when I submit these two, hard parse will happen for both. That means this step, execution plan exists in cache, will fail and it will consider it as no, and optimization and resource generation will perform and then execution will happen. Now we'll understand why theoretically and in terms of when we say in English these both are same, but why it is generating hard parse and why it's not going for soft parse is, whatever we have submitted from client, ASCII of every character will be replaced. That is, for all of these statements, for all of these characters, ASCII characters will be generated for the server to understand what it is. When you generate ASCII character from here, if you see HR.employee and HR.department, so when you match character by character, at this place it is getting differentiated. When it turns to ASCII. So that is the reason both will do a hard parse and soft parse will not be selected. So it is essential that we are making sure about our query when submitting, so that it uses soft parse. What will happen, what is the advantage of using of soft parse is, when the plan is already existing, when an execution plan is already existing, it need not perform this operation, which is saving our time, and it will directly do soft parse and execution. This is one thing. So these are the steps that will be performed when we submit a query at the client side. The query when it goes to server side, the first one what are performed is all these steps. So it will check for syntax check, it will do semantic check and shadeful check. If the plan, execution plan is already existing in the shadeful, then it will do soft parse. If it is not existing, it will do hard parse. So how do my execution plan look like? When I submit a query, this is my execution plan. execution plan, it's a basically it's a statements, line of statements in a tree structured view. So if you see, when I submitted select star from employee E and department D, where I have given some join condition, so how it is being getting the output is, if you see here, there are some steps here, 1, 2 and 3. So that means first this has been executed, next this has been executed, next a join has been performed on these two, and then it returned the row saying select statement, and what I have submitted is a select statement. That is what it is saying. We'll see in our sessions what explain plan is, what I should understand from an explain plan, what can I interpret from an explain plan. Even before executing a query, we can get an explain plan and guesstimate whether this will perform better or not. So if you see, a department table has been accessed full. When you say table access full, table HR dot department is, it means that table has been scanned, full table has been scanned, and next it is saying full table has been scanned for HR dot employee. So we have something called as cost. So cost is how much is the cost in terms of per CPU to bring the HR dot department. How many bytes of memory we have got here? How many bytes of memory of data we have read from the database? So when you say cardinality, the meaning of cardinality is how many distinct number of rows. So if you take a particular table, if I ask a cardinality of a table, the cardinality of a table is number of distinct unique records of that table. For example, if I query select star from department, we go back here. If I say select star from department, select star from employee. So I'll say, so if you see, I have 5 rows here, 5 unique rows, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. But why did I got cardinality? So I got cardinality as 5 here. Next, if I say select star from department, that is the 5. If I say select star from employee, employee number is the primary key, and I have 14 rows as shown by here, 14 of 14 total rows, and that is the reason my cardinality here is 14. When you join both, when I join both using some join, what is the cardinality? So as it is an equally join, 14 equal to 14, the output will be 14 rows, and here the cost is 5 to join both, and the memory used is 2618, and the cardinality is 14. So basically the cardinality definition means number of unique distinct rows in a table. So I can call it as a number of rows in the table for a primary key. So that is a cardinality of any table. So this is a simple query and this is a simple explain plan. This is how the execution plan look like. We can write some complex queries, and also we can understand how it will be going. So okay, to frame a execution plan by an optimizer. So optimizer decides this plan. How should I execute on this? So how do optimizer does an execution plan? So my point is, when I execute this above query, select star from employee department D, will I get a same execution plan? I'm executing it today, I'm executing it after a month, I'm executing it after 6 months and 1 year. So within a period of 1 year, whenever I execute this query, will my execution plan remain same? That is the question number 1. The answer to that is yes and no. That means it all depends on how your data is in the table, and also it also depends on several other factors. If your database is stable, that means no changes has been happened to DB, no changes happened to OS, no changes happened to data not increased and not decreased. If everything is stable, yes, you'll get the same execution plan. But there are few parameters that will affect your execution plan. So one is query formation. If you are executing the same query, yes, you will get it. And again, the join conditions in a query, bind variables in a query, and also the initialization parameters. If something has been changed in the initialization parameter at DB level, you may have an effect. And it also depends on the system statistics and object statistics. So basically these all will affect our execution plan. So that is the reason a support has to be given for something which is placed in a production to get complete quickly. Okay, so you are in a stage where you have identified you have a performance related issues. So the point is, you know, something is performing bad, something is really taking a long time for getting some result, whether it can be selecting a statement, whether it can be inserting some data into one of the table, it can be updating, it can be deleting. So for whatever the case, either insert, select, update, delete, whatever it is, you know that something is taking longer time than expected. So what we need to do in that case, so in any performance related problems, below are the major steps that we do. We first obtain execution plan. So we know what is execution plan now. So execution plan is the way that optimizer has chosen to perform the requested operation. So the requested operation can be select, insert, update and delete. So the first step is we need to obtain the execution plan and we need to interpret the execution plan. So now I have an execution plan. I'm at this stage now. I got an execution plan. I need to understand what is the cost, what are the number of bytes it read, what is the cardinality for that, and whether the join which has been performed on the tables which are there in the from clause, is that join sufficient or it's a efficient join or not. So you can think that you are doing table access full, but you may see that your index can be used there instead of a table access full. So we need to understand all that concept. So we need to interpret the execution plan, and we need to see if we can improve anything to get the efficient execution plan. So number of rows or the data that is being retrieved from the server, it depends on the beautiful execution plan. If that is good, we get the data quickly. If that is bad, we get our data with delay. So coming there, so now we know what we need to do when we have a performance issues. We need to obtain execution plan, we need to interpret execution plan, we need to see if we can improve the efficiency of that. So what are all the ways to improve that? Now I know that I need to improve something based on some execution plan. So what I need to do? So what are the different methods for that is the one which we discussed, get execution plan, identify the problematic area and we fix it. But we still feel after what we fix also, after the best that we have done for his execution plan also, we feel that there are some, still there is some performance problem. So basically there is something other also called as AWR. Apart from the execution plan, we can also get AWR report. We'll see in our sessions how to extract AWR report, how to understand AWR report, and we'll just analyze it. AWR report also, what it is also, and we have something also called as SQL plan, and we can analyze that also. So these are all different levels of identifying what the problem is. We can just go by execution plan. If we see performance improvement, we can stop it there. But if we may still have some more. We need some more performance improvement. We go to AWR. Look, say kind of different levels of analyzing the issue and improving performance. So by the end of this course, we also understand what are hints, what hints to specify to improve query performance. So we'll understand what exactly is a hint, what are the different types of hints. To improve my query performance, can I specify any hint? If yes, what are the appropriate hints to improve performance at appropriate points? Also we'll understand when you create a table, we'll also create some indexes. So the dummy rule we know is index improves query performance. That's true, but not in all cases. Also, what type of index? There are types of index. There is an index called as B-tree index. There is a bitmap index. There is a function-based index. So it all depends on what is my query and why my query is not using an index if index is there, and have I created a correct type of index or not. Also, we understand what is meant by driving table and how to use tables. So, for example, I need to write a query on 3 tables: employee, department, bonuses, some salaries. I have 4 tables. If I write in the from clause employee, department, bonus, salary, employee, bonus, department, salary, so I have 4 tables. I can write these 4 tables in a 16 combinations and all will result in the same query. But in terms of execution, there is a difference in generating the execution plan and getting the output. So we'll also see how to write that order. Employee, first I need to write employee, or first I need to write department, or first I need to write bonus or salary. So what is the order of the tables that I can write in the from clause, which will really affect the performance. So in short, we are going to learn how to improve the performance of my query. So when you say here is a query, it can be a select statement, insert, delete and update. It can be anything. So basically that's what we are going to see in this session. So I leave it to you guys if there are any queries.